Hello, my name's Stephen, welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to do a bit of a book haul for August. Even though my to read pile is already pretty big, it didn't stop me from buying more books. But my justification was this time, I've got a lot of series that are ongoing, and I thought if I buy the other books in the series that then wraps them up, that's good. Surely I'm not essentially buying whole new series and starting a bunch of different new things. Although I have also bought a bunch of new things that are new books. Anyway, I bought the third book in Ed McDonald's first trilogy. The third book is called Crowfall. I've read the first book, I already have the second book on the shelf to read, so I've now bought the third book. This is fantasy. I don't want to call it grimdark. Some people might, I wouldn't particularly call it that. It's from Gollancz. It's got a very dark tone. The main character is a very grey character. It feels almost post-apocalyptic in some ways. There's some technology, there's some magic, there's some otherworldly beings. It's really, really interesting. It's a complex world, it's layered, but the books are quite lean. They're about 400 or 500 pages each, and I really enjoyed the first one. Thought it was something very, very different, something I just really hadn't seen before. It's not a farm boy, it's not a quest book, it's something really different, and the world that he built was really special. So I picked up the third book, and I'll be reading books 2 and 3 this year. I also picked up the second book, The Righteous. This is the second book by David Ragg. I read the first book recently, The Black Hawks, which is fantastic. It's a epic fantasy novel. There is some humour, but it is not a funny fantasy book. And as proof of this, I recently did an interview with David where we talked about the humour in the books, the character, the fact that it's quite a dark book in terms of tone. They are getting to really difficult situations. So humour comes out sometimes in the most unexpected and unwanted times, but it's a part of life. People make jokes at funerals to try and cope with the grief, and it's a similar sort of thing in his book. There are some dark moments and the humour kind of balances out, but that's not what the story is about. It's about this group of mercenaries who are not the best. They're particularly brave, they're not really that skilled, but they're an interesting bunch of people trying to get through the world and trying to just earn a living in a very complex world in terms of there's a lot of moving parts going on, and they're just kind of being dragged along through history in what's happening in this and trying to make the best of it. So I don't want to say it feels like Firefly, but you know what I mean, that kind of edge of the world, people, bigger things, bigger players, and they're just somewhere caught in the middle trying to do their own thing. So that's probably why I'd say that, but it's really good. I picked up book 2, The Righteous, and I'll be reading that soon. Check out my interview with David if you want more information on this series. I've also picked up the third book by Catherine Arden. The third book is called The Winter of the Witch. The first one was The Bear and the Nightingale. I absolutely love this book. It was incredible. I think it's my favourite read so far this year because it's so different to the kind of thing that I normally read. Technically, I guess you'd say it's fantasy, but it feels more like folklore mixed with history. It's not a historic novel in terms of she's repeating events, but she dances between the raindrops of certain things in history and yet tells her own story within that world with fictional characters interacting sometimes with real characters. But she takes Russian and Slavic folklore and expands upon these stories. It's about a young girl who's born a bit different, who can talk to some of the beings that are out there, and there again she's a part of history. Things are happening. Her father expects certain things of her family expects certain things of her as a young woman in that era. Really fascinating, really atmospheric. It's the perfect kind of book to kind of curl up with on a cold night, have the fire on and just sit and read it under a blanket or something. But I loved it. So I read book 1, I've got book 2, and I've just picked up book 3, which finishes the trilogy. And I will read both of those again this year. I'll be reading book 2. That's my next read actually on my pile. I also picked up Beneath the Twisted Trees. This is one of the books of the Song of the Shattered Sands by Bradley Beaulieu. I realised I had kind of books 3, 5 and 6, and I suddenly thought I don't have book 4, so I've gone out and I've got book 4 now, and then there's just book 6, which has just come out. If you're watching this around sort of August time when I'm doing it, it's just come out, and that wraps up the whole 6-book series. They're some of the best fantasy series that I've read in a long time. Epic world building, a sort of desert setting, and I'm glad to see that the series is finally getting the love that I think it deserves, because Bradley is one of the best out there at the moment. His series is just absolutely amazing. Recently, Books with Brittany spoke about it on her channel. Holly Reeves talked about it on her channel as well, so that was really good. So I'm glad they're starting to pick up books and enjoy them and read them, so more people should be reading it. So I can't wait to dig into this world and find out more what's happening to the main character, Chada. I did an interview with Brad. He told me a character's name. I've completely forgotten it and can't pronounce it. Anyway, check out his interview that I did with him. He talks about the series. He talks about the world building. He also talks about the kind of the foundation upon which this series was built. But there's not too many series spoilers within that video, so that's quite good. So watch that video, find out more about the series, and pick up the first book, which is 12 Kings or 12 Kings in ShareAlike, depending upon where you are in the world. I recently just finished The Maleficent Seven by Cameron Johnston. This book is coming out very soon at time of recording. I got an advanced reading copy and read it, and I absolutely loved it. The name, as it suggests, The Maleficent Seven, is a play upon the Seven Samurai, or the Magnificent Seven, the sort of westerns that were made based upon this. Except what he's done is something a bit different. He's taken 7 awful villains who are the main characters, and they're the best hope for this town in being overrun by something even worse. Really fascinating book, really interesting, really exciting, really funny at times, dark and twisted. Really enjoyed it. I think it's probably Cam's best book to date. He's done 2 other books before, a duology. This book is not connected to his other ones. Totally separate. It's a pretty standalone book as well, so check that out. I'm probably going to do an interview with Cam in the next few months on here as well, so depending on when that comes out, I might have a link to his interview too. I've just finished reading Artifact Space by Miles Cameron, also known as Christian Cameron. He's written over 43 books at this point. He's done fantasy, he's done historical fiction, he's done crime, he's done all sorts. This is his first ever science fiction novel, which is quite interesting. He's always loved the genre, but he hasn't written a book in the genre until now. I did an interview with him as well recently. You can have a look at that here. We talk about the book. And he's a fascinating guy. We talk about his history. He's someone who's lived. He's really been there. He's travelled. He's done it. We talk about his history. We talk about his time in the Navy, how it influenced him, his early influences on novels from when he was growing up, all that stuff. Absolutely brilliant content. Really good stuff to find out more about him and how he became the writer that he is today. I also picked up a new fiction novel called Together We Will Go by JMS, or Joe Michael Straczynski. He's someone who's done many things. He's written for Marvel and DC Comics, a lot of the Thor films, the early stuff, especially the first one, Ken Branagh. It's based upon the comics that he wrote. He wrote Spider-Man for years. They've done stuff like that. He wrote Captain America for years, and stuff in the most recent Marvel films. Some of the speeches that Cap gives about not moving, based upon his work. Anyway, he created Babylon 5. He wrote for Jeremiah. He worked on Sense 8. He wrote The Changeling, the screenplay that went on to win an Oscar, directed by Clint Eastwood. This guy has done all sorts of things over the years. Now he's come into novels for the first time, and his first book seems like quite a tragic, funny and poignant story. It's about a group of people who are all deciding essentially to end their life. So they get on a bus, they're going to have one epic last journey, get to San Francisco, I think it is, and then drive off the bus together. As the title says, Together We Will Go. And it's a story about these people growing, finding out more about each other. Maybe they change their mind, maybe they don't. But it sounds really thought-provoking and really interesting. And given that I know he's so good at creating characters, I'm a huge admirer of his work. I dedicated one of my books to him, in fact. That's how much I admire him as a writer. So to see him coming into writing fiction, I'm excited. I'm really enthusiastic. I want to see what he does. He's actually got a non-fiction book talking about being a writer that's coming out around the same time now. So that's on order. But that's fine. That's fiction. That's research. So it's non-fiction. It's research. It's helpful. Yeah. That's why I'm justifying it. Yeah. I've got 2 other books. I've got The Dragon's Path by Daniel Abraham. The main name is familiar. If you're a fantasy fan, you'll probably know him. If you don't, I knew him first because I was vaguely aware of his books, but I hadn't picked him up for any reason. Then I started watching The Expanse, and I went back and started reading the books. And now I want to read some of his early fantasy novels. So I picked the first one in the trilogy, and we'll see what it's like. I should also say I pre-ordered the special 10th anniversary edition that Orbit have released. Just look at that cover. Oh, ooh, suits me. I've ordered that as well because it looks amazing. 10th anniversary already, can you believe it? But it looks amazing. It's one of these things that I thought, if I didn't order it, would I regret it afterwards? And the answer was yes. So I pre-ordered this. It looks amazing. It's a great series of books. I've read 5 books. I've got book 6 to read. I'm kind of staggering them. I'm watching the TV series, then going back and reading the book because you get so much more from the book. And also it's a slightly different story because things have diverged. Things they didn't do early in the books, they did early in the TV show and that kind of stuff. So I love analysing both of them and kind of looking at the two of them. And I'm thinking in the future, for another episode of my kind of dissecting things, I'm going to look at the TV series and of series 1 and the first 2 books and see what's different and talk about why they did certain things on TV they didn't do in the books and so on. But anyway, I'll get to that later. So that's probably all of the books I ordered in the last month. It's really too much as it is. I'm struggling under a giant TBR, but I'll get there eventually. So what have you been reading? Let me know. Get in touch. I'll be back soon with another video.